I thought that the Democrat media loved refugees, even if they're not refugees from all over the world. Turns out they've got some questions now. About 50 of them so far, not the 10 million who came in under Biden. Let's talk to our friend Jeremy Carl about this. He's the author of The Unprotected Class, which is a fantastic book. I've got my copy of it here in my library. How anti-white racism is tearing America apart. Jeremy, let's just start with your overview of. Hold on a second. Why is it that now the media, like ABC News, Associated Press, you name it, when they report on the Trump administration taking in South African refugees, they use a lot of words like alleged refugees or purportedly or according to the administration? They're really parsing these 50 guys and gals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a real mask off moment, as I put it on my X account, and that they're really sort of revealing their underlying kind of biases. I mean, and there's really no question that given some of the things going on in South Africa, that these people are under legitimate political persecution. They have legitimate fear for their safety. And if there were ever a group of refugees that you might think would do well here, I think it will be these folks. But yet the media is interested in kind of really, as you said, parsing very, very closely just exactly every single detail of these folks.
Yeah, why? Let's get to the why.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clearly that they have the wrong skin color for the refugee community, and particularly the refugee industrial complex. And we just saw this today in an announcement from the Episcopal Church that they are not going to resettle these refugees. They're not going to be involved in it in any way, even though it would just be a couple in their case, probably. And so they're withdrawing from the entire refugee resettlement program that they've been part of for decades. And they sort of gave this very farcical explanation about how, well, this isn't really, they mentioned their involvement in anti-apartheid things historically. And they said, these people are not real refugees. And, this is just not what the information says. I mean, it's just not accurate. So, but it's revealing in terms of the preferences of the far left mainline denominations.
I have to say, I was not surprised at all. I knew the media would take the reaction that they have, or they would react in this way to South Africa white. So you have to specify, right? If they were black South African refugees for whatever reason, and just to be clear, if there were just black people from South Africa who showed up at our southern border and said, I have a fear of violence in my country, they'd be talking about, oh, they deserve their day in court. They need to go in front of the immigration system, and they need to have this whole, and that would be fine. But because it's white South Africans, who are a small percentage of the overall South African population at this point, they have all these questions. The media didn't surprise me at all, Jeremy, but the Episcopal Church thing, maybe it's my dad's Episcopalian, so I hold out some hope that it's not just some left-wing social justice institution that happens to have some nice cathedrals. But I guess I'm wrong, because, I mean, this seems nuts. Like the Episcopal Church, as you've pointed out, decoupling from a 40-year-long relationship with refugee resettlement in America over 50 South African refugees. Like, what point are they trying to make?
Yeah, it is crazy. And these are far woke churches denominationally. And I want to be a little bit fair here. I have a friend who's a congregational church, which is probably even to the left of the Episcopal Church. He's a congregational pastor. And when I sort of put something out on X recently, he reached out and said, well, not all of us are woke. So at an individual congregation level, if you're in a mainline congregation, you may not see kind of the far left, what's going on here, the anti-white racism. But as I document in the book and have talked about elsewhere, when you go up to the denominational level and a lot of these things that people in individual churches are not paying attention to, you see a lot of the really radical rhetoric on race that gets us into a place like what we saw with the Episcopal Church today.
And yet the Trump administration not backing off this one bit and saying that there is plenty of cause for taking these individuals in as refugees. I believe there could be a lot more also who come. I mean, Jeremy, are you pretty familiar with the explanations as to why is it that they are under threat and why they? Because I just think people should hear this is a pretty straightforward case.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think this is important to say. It's not just white South Africans that are being impacted here. It's a very specific, large subset of them, the Afrikaners, who are the sort of Dutch, largely Dutch descended South Africans. They've been in South Africa in many cases for 400 years almost. But they tend to be heavily in agriculture. So they've been targeted in farm murders at sort of horrific rates. But I think so that's one piece of it. But the other really key piece of it is a bill has gone through the South African legislature that is targeting their land potentially for expropriation without compensation, which is the same thing that happened in Zimbabwe, which was formerly Rhodesia at one point, and under Mugabe, who now everybody agrees was a really bad guy. And what that did is it both wiped out every white farmer in Zimbabwe. The overwhelming majority of whites were forced to flee Zimbabwe. And then also partially as a result of the collapse of their agricultural sector, many, many millions of black Zimbabweans were put in starvation conditions. So it was really a disaster for everybody. And I think the Trump administration is kind of firing a shot across the bow, saying we don't want to see anything like a repeat of that type of situation in South Africa.
We'll come back here and talk more about some of the policies you and I discussed from your book, The Unprotected Class, and how they're coming to fruition. Some of them, and there are more that should. We'll discuss that in a second. But look, with the concerns about tariffs and all kinds of challenges ahead of us with where the debt stands, the national debt, you want to be protected financially for the future. And this is why so many Americans are turning to the Birch Gold Group to help them get gold and even gold IRAs. They've helped tens of thousands of people convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. Hedge against inflation and economic instability with gold. It makes sense. Learn how to own physical gold at a tax-sheltered account. Text my name, Buck, to Birch Gold at 989898. That's my name, Buck. Text Buck to 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free, no obligation info kit. Again, all you have to do to get started with Birch Gold, text my name, BUCK, to 989898 today. All right, Jeremy, let's talk about some of the biggest things that the administration has tackled in terms of, I think we should call it racial justice, and the Unprotected
Absolutely.
Class. Your book lays out some of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is really an area where I would have to give the administration an A plus, and that I laid out a number of things in the book that I thought we should be doing. And we've done so many of them to within reason. Now we've still got a huge problem, and there's still a lot more to go. But in doing things like getting rid of affirmative action at the federal level, in getting rid of so-called disparate impact, which they just did by an executive order, that's absolutely huge. Rooting out DEI and other sort of racist policies from throughout the federal government. It's, some of the things that they're doing on immigration, obviously to secure the border, are tangentially related to this. So it's really been an outstanding effort by the administration. And as you point out, I mean, we shouldn't apologize or run away from it. This is a racial justice effort to say that we are going to treat everyone equally in the United States, regardless of race, which is not how we've been doing it for quite some time.
How much of the work is really being done to get away from? Let me rephrase this. The Supreme Court looked at the affirmative action reality in elite universities, and finally came down and just said, "Look, you can't do this, right? Like this is clearly,
Right.
The era of." And just by way of letting the audience know where I come from on this, people ask me when I knew I was a conservative, and I mean, I've always kind of just leaned, I guess, with like a traditional American view of things for as long as I can remember anything. But I do remember being in high school at a scholarship high school where everybody, for the most part, was from pretty families of limited financial means. And the black and Hispanic kids in my class, even if they were at the bottom of the class, were picking like which Ivy League or equivalent school they went to. And the Asian kids and the kids with first generation Hungarian immigrant parents or whatever, they were being told like, oh, you got a 1,500 on the SAT, but like, let's hope that, SUNY whatever is going to give you enough money. I mean, it was really a stark difference. And I just remember as a kid being like, well, that's just not right. It's not even a question of fair.
Yeah.
It's just, this is not right. People can try to tell me it's right, but they're lying to me. Finally, with the Supreme Court, did what is right on this. But has it actually changed the way that these universities, the acceptance rates of different groups and all that, or is it just a Supreme Court decision that's being largely ignored?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because not only can you read the book, and I get into a little bit of this, but this was, the Supreme Court had decided, but the results of that did not come in. If you look on YouTube, I gave a long talk at Hillsdale a few months ago where I really get into the details of what happened, and it is actually just what you were suggesting. So the Supreme Court basically ruled you can't discriminate, and effectively what the universities have done is they've just thumbed their nose at the Supreme Court and said, I mean, this is very ironic because the left claims to be very concerned about who's obeying court orders right now. They said, yeah, we're going to discriminate anyway. I mean, they're not saying they are, but if you look at the numbers, you've had roughly a 10% drop on average, but it's been all over the map, from increases to somewhat larger drops in African American and Hispanic student populations in these areas. Whereas on a merit basis, if it was being done on a racially blind basis, you would have expected 50 to 75% drops and concomitant increases in Asian American and white applicants getting into these schools. So it's really clear that these universities are just ignoring the Supreme Court, and they're going to dare this Trump administration to really do anything about it. And I think this will be a big next frontier for the administration to pursue that aggressively.
What should they do? How should they pursue this?
Well, I'm not an attorney, so I want to be a little bit cautious, but I will just say Harmeet Dillon, who is the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, she is really great. She gets it. She is tough. She is focused. And, I expect that there'll be people with obviously cause for private action about the fact that they're not getting in, whereas lesser qualified candidates are. But I think that some of the things you're seeing right now, where the Trump administration, albeit on slightly different grounds, is threatening to or withholding funds from these universities, that's really the only way that you're going to get changing, is that you're going to have to take away a lot of money. And all these universities get a lot of federal funding, whether they're public or private. And then ultimately you need to change some of their personnel, because personnel is policy. So some of the people who are really the ringleaders in bad behavior here are going to have to come out. They're going to have to leave these universities, or you're not going to get real change.
Some nations have a nationwide fund, a sovereign wealth fund. Japan, Norway, Saudi Arabia, just to name a few. It's a national program that many citizens of that country benefit from after the nation invests in the development of an asset, the development of oil, for example. Our nation has never had one, though several states do, like Texas. But for America, there are some folks out there who believe that this country has an asset worth $150 trillion buried on American soil that could be the basis for creating such a fund. This endowment, so to speak, is so large it could pay off our national debt 4 times over. Why has it been kept secret for so long? Well, thanks to a Supreme Court decision, President Trump could soon release it to the public. Jim Rickards, former advisor to the White House and Federal Reserve, says if you're over 50, this could be your best chance to build lasting wealth from a once-in-a-century event. To hear more of Jim's thinking, go online to birthright2025.com. If he's right, it could make President Trump the most popular president in history and help millions of investors retire wealthy. Go to birthright2025.com to get the details free of charge, paid for by Paradigm Press. What are some of the other things that you see this administration doing, or that you are hopeful they will be doing in the realm of racial justice here going forward?
Yeah, well, I think there are certain things that they could be doing. I mean, everything from how we deal with things in the census, in terms of how we count folks. We sort of did it in the last census in a way to maximally balkanize people into every single different group that we could get them in, and use that as a basis for giving groups and subgroups kind of advantages. I would love to go see that go away with. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize Hispanic didn't even exist as a census category until 1980, right? So these were not categories that were handed down with the 10 Commandments. These are more recent things. So I think there's things we can do in terms of categorization. I think there's more we can do in terms of deportation and the border. But I think a lot of it now is just going to come down to execution. I mean, the folks in the administration. Again, a number of the decision makers there, without taking too much credit for anything, certainly. I mean, they've read my book. They've read other books that are talking about things that we need to do. It's just going to be about execution and following through. And again, I think we have, with folks like Stephen Miller and folks like Harmeet Dillon, we've got the right staff in there to make these moves. And it's just going to be, but it's going to be trench warfare for a while, because this type of racial caste system is the way that the left keeps its power, and they're not going to surrender it without a fight.
I do think it's finally this administration is finally one that is willing to look at what the left has and what it does to keep power even when they lose elections, which has been one of the great challenges for conservatives for a long time. And the racial entitlement state is a huge part of that. And it's one of the reasons why people always say, well, how come Republicans have such a hard time making inroads with minorities? Well, because the regime, the permanent regime as it has existed for decades now, is such that the Democrats are clearly the party of, there is a racial spoil system for certain groups to stay with us based on their skin color. And the Republicans are the ones who, haven't necessarily agreed with it, but have kind of gone along with it too, which was to their own detriment.
No, you're absolutely correct. And if you look at the funding of the NGO industrial complex, which kind of gets to this idea of these permanent groups that you're talking about, that's so much of it right there. And just defunding some of these groups removes some of the incentives for bad behavior that we've seen. And I think it's, again, really encouraging. As you correctly said, this administration does understand the long game in the way that Republican administrations haven't. And just even having that understanding gives us a chance to win in a way that I think we haven't had in decades.
So we're making some gains here, some wins. What is the thing that, if you could put one thing on the Trump administration's radar that you would like to see them tackle that they haven't necessarily gotten on that much yet, what would that be?
Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, I think I don't know there's any one category that's jumps to mind immediately. I guess I would say really encapsulating, more than kind of doing new things, because I think they understand the things, but it's encapsulating the current things that are maybe in executive orders and making them in law. So, for example, disparate impact, which I've just sort of referred to, but it is this thing that nobody really knows about, but is one of the things that enables huge amounts of discrimination in the United States. So that's actually currently, for various stupid reasons, is actually in federal law in the 1991 Civil Rights Act. So you can do certain things with an executive order, but you've really got to address the underlying law. And that means that Congress has got to get busy. And for Congress, which has been moving a lot slower than the administration, they're going to really need to have the whip hand out to kind of get Congress going and really make sure that these things are not just things that can be at least partially undone by the next president.
I mean, disparate impact, for anybody who's not familiar with the concept, it's very important. It's very pernicious and undermines our legal system, I think, in really troubling ways, has for a long time. But it is, you can have not for you, but for people watching and listening, you can have a law that is on its face race neutral, but if the results of that law disproportionately affect a certain group, so, even something like credit scores would be another example of this, right? Well, if reliance on credit scores, it's disproportionately too many people who are black or Hispanic are being, it goes against them in credit because of their credit report. Therefore, credit reports must be a problem. Like, that's just disparate impact in a principle. But as I like to point out to people, Jeremy, you could just do this with any law about assault or about violence, about murder, with men and women. I mean, you could say there's a hugely disparate impact from murder laws on the male population. Somehow we're just getting hit with all the murder charges. Like 5% of murders are committed by women, and we got these murder laws. So I think we got to look at these murder laws more closely.
Absolutely. And you hit right on it. And it's not just laws, it's corporate policies. But you have seen with some of this disparate impact stuff, I talk about in the book, credit scores, even things that looked like they were racially neutral that the Biden administration pursued on its face were effectively racial wealth transfers. And the Biden administration knew exactly what it was doing when it put these sorts of policies in, as did the Obama administration. But an independent member of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights wrote a law paper that I cite that was entitled, I believe, Disparate Impact Policy Makes Everything Presumptively Illegal. And that's basically correct. I mean, effectively, you're always having this sword of Damocles hanging over your head, ready to fall down and cut it off at any time because of disparate impact policy. And that's the real importance of getting rid of it at the legislative level. So I think that's kind of going to be the next frontier.
It's a great book. If you haven't already gotten your copy, go get The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart. Very much something to keep in mind during a lot of the Trump battles ahead here. Jeremy Carl, great to have you on, sir. Good to see you.
Thanks, Buck. It's a pleasure to be on.
Israel is still under attack. There's been missile fire, and there's been all kinds of threat from the terrorists in the region against the Jewish state. The reality in Israel is that parents are still having to worry about taking their children to school. They still have to worry about the next siren blaring. The next attack could happen at any moment. This is why we have partnered with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews to help provide life-saving aid and security essentials. Your urgently needed gift will help provide security essentials like bomb shelters, flak jackets, and bulletproof vests for first responders, armored security vehicles, ambulances, and more. Join me in standing with Israel. Call to make your gift at 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-4325, or online at supportifcj.org to give. One word, supportifcj.org.